the sooner you realize life is going to be a struggle, and then your job is to learn to struggle well, then things change. But it's like when you have this weird expectation that everything is going to be all right, or like the first time that you're in a wrestling or boxing or football or whatever, and someone clobbers you, you're like, oh, hold on. You're like, no, but that's what this game is. And you're like, oh, okay, then you kind of have that stress inoculation. You're like, okay, I got this. This is okay. There will always be struggles no matter whatever level you're in, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a ditch digger, there's always going to be struggles.
Welcome to the Mountain Tough Podcast, brought to you by Sig Sauer. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Mountain Tough Podcast. We are so glad that you are here. It is our goal to bring you the best of the best, inspiring, like-minded guests, digging into what makes them tick, who they are, their mindset, and their mental toughness, unpacking that and teaching some of those skills out to the audience so that you can live that virtuous life, that abundant life. If you are a first-time listener or a loyal listener, and if you have a chance to leave us a ranking or review, those do mean the world to us. The rankings and reviews do allow the episodes get out to more people to transform more lives. Also, going on around Mountain Tough right now, there is a lot of buzz, a lot of hype around two things. The first is Tough Fest is our huge community event for all Mountain Toughers to gather from around the globe in Bozeman, Montana. The Tough Fest registration page is live. That is going to be June 13th this year in Bozeman. If you missed last year, you're definitely not going to want to miss this year. It is an amazing, epic, life-changing day. Mountain Toughers getting together in the same room, in the same environment is life-changing. Plus, we'll have a lot of outdoor workouts, indoor workouts, team-based workouts, but all people can join regardless of fitness level, regardless if they've done Mountain Tough before. It's really for anyone looking for that iron sharpens iron experience. There'll be world-class guest speakers. It's a phenomenal day, and I do promise it is going to change the trajectory of your life if you're able to make it. That's June 13th at the lab. There's also a lot of hype going on in the Mountain Tough community right now around our new Gym Daily product. The Gym Daily is a fresh Mountain Tough coached workout in the Mountain Tough Plus app every 24 hours. So think about a Mountain Tough personal trainer training you as a mountain or military athlete in your pocket with a fresh experience every single day with gym equipment. So it's like us in your gym training you. It's as close as you're going to get digitally. That product is taking off. And if you haven't subscribed or checked out the app yet, you can always, as a new subscriber, get the Mountain Tough app on a 14-day free trial. So just grab that app, Mountain Tough Plus, and you can check out the Gym Daily for 14 days for free. Transitioning to today's episode I've been excited about for a long time. He's one of my favorite humans on the planet. Today I get the chance to sit down with Bert Sorin, president of Sorinex Equipment. I've known Bert for a while. Before I got the chance to meet him in person several years ago, he was always a mentor of mine. I was always paying attention to what he was up to because he is an inspiring, larger-than-life character, but he also bridged the gap and continues to work on bridging the gap between strength and conditioning and the outdoor community. He is one-of-a-kind, salt-of-the-earth individuals, and we've gotten closer over the years as I've gotten the opportunity to go to his Summer Strong events at his HQ and his Winter Strong events on his farm. And he has a special gift from God that allows him to bring communities of like-minded people together and raise the bar of everyone in the room. Phenomenal conversation today with Bert. So stand by with my conversation with Bert Sorin. Definitely want to talk to you about the Sorinex founding story. I know that's an amazing story of
Oh, thanks.
of Pops, and I think just building equipment out of the carport and how that turned into a business and how you stepped in and kind of grew that. But before we dive into that, I wanted to ask you a little bit about what it looks like for you now. And I believe are you 24 years into Sorinex?
This would be my 25th year.
25
So
years.
quarter century is pretty freaking wild. So I'm in 1999 I started.
Wow.
So this would be, yeah, the 90s. So yeah, this is my 25th year.
Well, let's work backwards instead of going in chronological order. Let's start with what it feels like for you now being a family man. I also want to talk about you guys homeschooling your kids now, that transition, but just your work-life family balance. And then I wanted to peel the onion back a little bit too on you leading that organization and managing team dynamics and people as well. So
Awesome.
25 years in, what does it feel and look like?
It's weird. In some ways, it feels just like what we've always done. Like, I guess it's kind of like before Sorinex in my life, i.e., like, but even before July 1, 1999, like I was in it. We've been around this our 44th year. So I was in it. 15, it was my first job working in the shop, in 91, 92. And then so, I was doing personal training and doing installs all through high school and college. So it was like kind of like always in it. But yeah, clocking in, 25 years ago and with the intent on just helping Pops, like, it's a family-owned business and you just see the stress of, your dad going through, all the rigors of running a business. And then you're like, hey, I just want to help, just want to help out. And so that was how it started. But yeah, now it's weird because I'm not that good at looking backwards at times, unless it's like the quiet moments. So everything, a lot of times, I'm trying to become more and more present in my life versus like future oriented. So, to look backwards is kind of like even further back. So yeah, when I stop and it's usually people. It's like it's weird. It's like jobs, i.e., like weight rooms. Big weight rooms are kind of like those. Like, oh yeah, I remember doing University of Miami in 2001. Like that was the year they won the national championship, and like all the things that were associated with that, and the new products we had to design custom for them. And like, so I'll remember kind of by jobs, not necessarily by years.
Yeah.
Because the years have just kind of melted into one just glob,
It's big milestones.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like from a, you remember, oh, he was working with us or she was working with us at that time. Or, obviously a big one was, my wife, Leslie, and then having kids. It's kind of like, oh, I remember doing this when I didn't have kids or I didn't have a family. And like what the perspective was at what we were doing at that point, there's a lot less weight placed on the daily because I hate to say it didn't matter as much. Like
Yeah.
when it's 2 or 3 employees and you don't have a family, like you're still, I wouldn't say a free agent, but there's still a lot of opportunity of things that you just go do if this thing doesn't work.
Less stress for sure.
Yeah, less stress. And now like there's that balance, I remember, when I'm single and I was throwing professional Highland games at the time, it was like, hey, I'm going to work all week. But then, if I'm not doing an install or a conference that weekend, I'm going to go throw and have a great time. And when I get home is when I get home. And that's just that. If I felt like staying in town or wherever I was for an extra half a day or a day or whatever, and like kind of just do what you want to do. And those days are gone.
Man.
So, you have more employees to be concerned about trying to, make sure that they're taken care of, and kids, and now that we're homeschooling, I want to make sure that my wife has support at home. And so it's people are like, "Yeah, you must be so proud." And yes, but it's not something, I hate to say, daily I just pontificate on,
You're just going.
because the stress is still on, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're still playing in the NFL. Like, you don't like, I'm gonna highlight reel of my career. It's like, man, I got a game this coming weekend. Like, I got to be prepared. So
Hmm.
it's in a way kind of like having a 25-year-old in a 25-year NFL career. It's like, you kind of backtrack everything maybe in the quiet times, but for the most part is like next month, next job, next everything is still coming. I'm onboarding 2 new employees this week. We're spooling them up, giving them the backstory, making sure they understand what not only the objective right, left, lateral limits of everything that the job description is, but like the color commentary in the background. What is the ethos of our brand? What is the what is the feeling and the heartbeat of it? What is the unwritten parts of the equation? And
Yeah.
this, I mean, you're running a brand that has definitely a culture to it. Culture is a hard one to put like on a business like statement,
It's
or like,
hard.
what is our ethos? What is our, man, I have a hard time like putting it on the wall. Like, this is what it is. It's kind of like, it or you don't. Like, we always talk about like living the code. Like, what does that really, people are like, what does that mean? And it's like, well, you just kind of know if you're doing it or not.
Hmm.
Are you choosing the hard things to do? Are you doing it with integrity? Are you caring about other people? Are you reaching out? Are you pushing to make yourself better? It's all of these things. It's a mindset. That's, in my opinion, living the code, doing what you said you're going to do. But I don't have a list of it on the wall, but maybe that's my own shortcomings of organization. Maybe some other companies would have it like perfectly structured out, and mine is always like the smell test. Like, you just kind of know if you're doing it. If you can look yourself in the mirror and go, yeah, like you put in a good one today, you've made those around you better. Anything that I've touched, I've not made it worse.
Hmm.
And okay, and it's like, I think Tate Fletcher said, my goal is to be a human in good standing. Like, it's like in the world in good standing. It's like,
That's
that's an
good.
interesting way of putting it. And so that's kind of the mindset of it. So, but obviously then, probably much like you have numbers you have to deal with, and it's like, okay, you could have all that fuzzy colorful stuff on this one, but you're like, hey, I have to be able to produce this much per year.
Yep.
I have to let people go, or
Yeah.
I have to go to the bank and have hard conversations. It's like, that's where kind of you have to balance the art and the science of the two pieces of the puzzle. And that's always a difficult one. So um, it's exciting. People like, what's your exit strategy? Or like, I'm 47. Or like, what's your exit strategy? When are you guys going to sell? Or are you going to do whatever? And I heard not too long ago, a couple of my employees actually said like, wow, when we started really kind of blowing up per se, they were like, oh yeah, the rumor was that you were going to sell and kind of like ride off in the sunset. And I was just so amazed. I was like, really? That's what y'all thought? They're like, well, yeah. And some of our were like, we would have. And I'm just like, wow, did I just totally miss the memo? Like, that was never a part of the equation. It's kind of,
Yeah.
it was weird because it kind of got me thinking. It's like, wow, should I have done that? Like, is that like, I don't know.
Well,
Like, that's not, I mean, my thing was kind of like Ahab, you're strapped to the white whale until, right? This is what we do.
and if you,
So
yeah, well,
it's a different way to think about it.
what would you do every day if you did sell? I mean, you would probably want to do something really similar to what you're doing right now.
Exactly. And so then it's like, okay, what would I do? Maybe I would do like a aspect of the business that I really like now, that we're maybe really good at, and you cut some of the other things out of it. And then I'm going, well, then why don't I just do that now? Like, why don't I just focus on those things, make the business better in those ways, hire out those other skills, and kind of just do what I would have done anyway, but you have 44 years of momentum behind you. And then like, okay, that sounds like a pretty good idea, because I'm not going to sit at home.
Yeah.
Now there's a part of me that goes, wow, if people are like, well, what if you sold? Like, what would you do? I was like, I would hang out with my family. I would hunt way too much.
Yeah.
They're like, you would get tired of it. I'm like, I really don't think I would. Like, Yeah, I know a lot of places I want to hunt that I can't afford it time or money wise. And if those were two obstacles that weren't in the way, like, I don't know, man, I'd like to take my shot at that
For
and see
sure.
how tired I would get with for hunting for 6 straight months. I don't know.
You could test those
What do you
limits.
think you would do? Like, if you didn't have to worry about money or obligations, what would you do?
Oh man, I've thought a lot about that, and I mostly land very similar to you in that I love coming in here so much
Mhm.
every day. I love doing what we're doing. I am very passionate about how Mountain Tough is transforming lives and changing lives and
Yep.
helping a lot of men get on the path. And I think that if I were to sell and walk away, I would have a big struggle on my hands of figuring out, like, how am I going to find something with this much purpose and passion, replacing that, and the team, and getting to train with the team
Yep.
every day. It would be hard to replace.
It would, right? Because a lot of your probably best relationships and your inspiration and your group all kind of stems from Mountain Tough, right?
Hmm.
Like, and I look at it, and my dad's reminding me, he's like, man, besides a few things, everything good you have in your life is because of this business. And he's like, and protect that, like protect the business because the business has given you this friend group, this lifestyle, this opportunity, like all these things. And I don't take that for granted. I mean, probably if you made a ton of money and cashed out, you'd probably build a bigger house, make a bigger gym out back, and then open up a gym for all your friends. And then in 10 years, you'd be sitting at the exact same point you're sitting at now,
Yeah.
going, I did it again. I grew the exact same thing because that's where your heart is. And that's probably what I would do too. I'd build a shop at my house and start designing stuff because it's fun. And then I'd start selling those designs to people. And then I'd
Yeah.
probably be doing it
It's
again. It's
crazy.
just,
Yeah. It's like
it is, it's wild.
we it's
So
it's hard to get
might
off
as
your
well ride the
purpose.
horse we're on, right?
Yeah. I do want to unpack the culture piece that you talked about, because culture is and can be everything. And culture can go through these roller coasters of highs and lows. And
Sure.
we've certainly experienced that. And I think there is culture challenges around kind of that first gen, second gen, third gen season of a business. It,
Oh, yeah.
it's very analogous to what you see with like Montana fifth generation farm and ranch families. So like the great grandfather built the ranch and worked 24/7 on the ranch, and then he hands that down, and then it's handed down again. And over time, some of those cultural traits can come and go if you're not fighting for them every day. And the people that come in on the third gen, your employees or your team members, a lot of times it's hard to even articulate how much work it took for a third gen to even exist. And so the mentality is just different. How have you navigated that?
I mean, I bet they'll probably make like a multi-series, multi-season show, like about like a Montana ranch at some point that would like, you know, just a joke there. But no, you're exactly right. Like we're already experiencing it, I mean, no one was around but Pops when Pops started that's still here besides me as a little kid. So I got to see parts and pieces of it, feel that stress, feel that struggle, watch the struggle, maybe be a part of the struggle. And then when I came on, there's a whole different, you know, I probably can't say I've ever worked as hard in some ways that my dad did
Hmm.
because it was a different job. It was a different job description. It was like, and I had to tell Pops at one point because, there was some friction and turbulence in that first generation to second generation taking control of the company. And it's kind of like when a bullet goes from supersonic to subsonic, there's that transonic wobble, right?
Hmm.
And that's a kind of until the bullet like restabilized a little bit. And that's kind of like where it was. It was like, is he in charge? Am I in charge? There's still respect both ways, but there, this all this like, well, whose line is it anyway, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, and we talked, and I said, man, Pops, like, we're right beside a highway. So I said, it's like if he found a piece of woods, had a machete, and hacked out a little walking trail, and then came back with a chainsaw and hacked out a bigger trail, and then hacked out a bigger trail. And when I got it, it was a dirt road. And then when I got it, I widened the dirt road. I put down crush and run. Later, I was able to put down pavement. Later, I was able to turn it into this. Then we had exits off of it. Now it's a highway. Well, the job description was different in all of those phases.
Yeah.
I can never go back and with a machete and cut a new path. It's not needed.
Yeah.
That skill set is no longer needed, but it was absolutely vital to the life of the business at the time. Ops isn't necessarily geared from just his gearing nor his age to turn it into a 4-lane highway with exits and gas stations on it. Like that's just not who he is. And at 73 years old, it doesn't need to be who he is.
For sure.
And so that's the hard part is kind of realizing like, hey, everyone's had a place in this timeline, and that's okay. And they're all were vital parts. And I even look at, gosh, I'm 47, like in 10 years, 15 years, like who am I going to be bringing on that's going to maybe have amazing ideas to turn it into something totally different, or not totally different, but, and am I going to be pushing back? And am I going to be like, no, this isn't the way that we did it when we did from this to this,
I mean, that's such a good analogy of clearing that road. It's so accurate because it's kind of like I think about it in terms of you in your 40s, you think you need to prove and work as hard just as you did in your 30s, but things are different. The wisdom's different. The experience is different. And you've already done that. So you don't need to do that again necessarily because now you have different skills for different reasons.
Yes, and you have to, and if you don't, it's ego and potentially maybe even imposter syndrome. And I've had that of like, okay, I'm not working as hard physically as my dad had to. I'm not deserving of X, Y, and Z. And you're like, but that was in 1982, and this is the capital we had. This is the skill set we had. This is like all this stuff, and I finally realized like if I'm not better at this point, or if I don't have a different skill set, or if the company isn't larger, healthier, whatever it may be, then I'm totally screwed off. If I'm having to still mix concrete in the trunk of my car, just like my dad had to do it in 82 to set posts in the ground because we didn't have a wheelbarrow, then that's probably a problem. Then I've done nothing in the last 20 years to make this situation better. And I had to kind of come to that realization. And, and he was kind of like, at one point, he was like, man, like you just have so much more than I did at this age and this and that and the other. And I'm like, congratulations.
That's what you want.
Congratulations. Because wasn't that the point, right? Like as an organism, we've attempted to grow, and I'm just happen to be a part of that organism. So yes, I hate to say it, I have potentially more skill sets or more wisdom. And it's not because I'm smarter. It's just because I've now soaked in your wisdom from 70 years and I'm adding my own stuff to it. And I have a group of friends. And so, yes, the goal is for the bloodline or the company's bloodline to continue to get smarter, more efficient, more effective. That is what a business growth is.
Yeah.
And if you don't see it as that, like it's a high probability just to kind of, turn into a trust fund kid kind of. And you see it. You see these people that go from a first generation to second, it kind of drops off, and a third just piss it away because they're not taking like, hey, let me learn all this information. And now I'm literally standing on the shoulders of giants. And now I could see further than the base level people could have seen because I'm inheriting this information, this corporate knowledge.
Yeah.
And if you can't move it forward, then maybe you're not the person for the job at that point.
Yeah. And the goal is to always improve, and those improvements make efficiencies. And then those efficiencies can be leveraged for greater things and greater growth. It just looks different.
it just looks different, and that's it. I mean, and heck, the weird part is like you, as you probably are learning as well, I'm sure you know this, and growth isn't always just an ambitious thing. Sometimes it's like critically necessary, even just how money works and money flows and stuff like that. Like, let's say you have a good year, well, now you have a lot of taxes.
Hmm.
And so you could choose to just give the money away that you've made and worked so hard for, or you could invest back in your business and in your people. But if you do that, you're going to have to grow next year to offset that additional expenditure. So you kind of, it's like we've talked about, when you're in this game of owning a business, you're either growing or you're dying. And if
Hmm.
you're staying the same, you're actually dying
Yep.
because inflation, because of all the other stuff going associated with it. So growth has to be the mindset, or you literally have to be intentionally trying to downsize and kind of soft crash it to an extent. And I think once someone starts that pathway, you're kind of killing it off. You're just like I said, soft crashing it. You're killing the business off to the point where 2 to 3 years you could walk away from it, without losing your home and losing everything you own. So kind of by proxy, the mindset of growth has to be the mindset.
It's scale or
It,
fail. Yeah.
it really, it's where it is. And so it's kind of scary at times, because at times you get to this new milestone, you're like, hey, can we, like a summit, you're like, hey, can we just take a breather here for a second, because this is kind of pretty here.
Yeah. It's
And you're like, yeah, but you don't realize you're sliding down the mountain 5% an hour just by standing there. And you're like, okay, so we got to just keep going. Okay, got it. So we just got to get to that next summit. And then you realize one day later, there's always another summit, and you always have to keep going. And it's just like, so it's kind of a mind trip when you're in it long enough to go, okay, so the pressure's never off. Got it. Okay, got it. Okay, that's we're in this for life. We're from the NFL, and you're getting attacked by other strong monsters every day. It's painful. Okay, got it. That's the game. All right, perfect. But it's kind of a weird feeling when you finally realize that, like, there is no getting out of the river.
You kind of have to remind
Yeah.
yourself of that all the time, though, because it's so easy to forget. And you'll have
So easy to forget.
these great moments, and you think there's a finish line. There is not a finish line, and it's really easy to forget that.
It's the surprise ending that you guys did last year at Winter Strong, when you guys did the workout. And then you had the surprise ending workout. It's like that every day.
It's
Until you just realize there's always going to be a surprise ending. And then you kind of go, okay, got it. Like,
Mhm.
it's like crossing the river, like I said, and realizing you never cross the river.
Yeah,
You just have to fight the river forever.
it never.
And some days you'll go into an eddy and it's like, this is nice. And some days the day's sunny, like the water feels good. And other days you're just holding on for dear life, but you're never out of the river, ever.
It's wild.
And that's the resilience piece that I think people don't realize as an entrepreneur. That they see the people Instagram balling out with a big house or whatever stuff they do, whatever. But they believe that it's like, now you got it. Like you're easy, you're on easy street. And like easy street is such there is a misnomer. I mean, and now unless you just sell out totally, you
Mhm.
sell out, you clocked out, walk with your money, and then you just decide to do what you're going to do. But honestly, I know a few people who have done that, and they're generally pretty miserable.
I know. I really
Like,
wish that more people talked about how hard entrepreneurship is and how hard it's going to be and how challenging it is. And some of the most challenging, tormenting, most painful things you're going to go through are going to happen if you take this entrepreneurship journey. And the flashy stuff you see on social, and
yeah,
it's just not real. Maybe it's real for 1% of the 1%, but for everyone else
yeah,
is just grinding.
just grinding. Yeah, and you have these flashes of nice, awesome, amazing, and that's when you start being super thankful for those days that come when it's like, hey, there wasn't any giant fires. Everyone's good. Sales are good. Deliveries were clean. Back feels all right today. Going to get a workout. Wife's happy. Kids are all right. All right. Let's go have a steak and sit down and
Be grateful.
wait for what comes out of door number 2 because the weather will change. And it's just like, but you have to realize like, okay, this is cool. This is it. And I had a very successful CEO for a buddy of mine. He and I were having this conversation and it was kind of wild. He looked at me, he goes, we're talking about just entrepreneurship and everything like that. And he goes, Bert, that's why guys like you and I, we trade a long, boring life for a short, exciting one. Just like, oh,
Yeah.
and he's like, the stress gets to a lot of guys in our world. And so I heard that and said, well, I have to now double down on health, on fitness, on my diet, whatever, because I choose to be one of those that gets to have a long, exciting life. Most people trade the stress and all the other stuff. They like, okay, you're going to live 80 years of boring, or you're going to live 58 years of hair on fire, and it's going to be amazing and super exciting. I get it. I get the math on that because it's no question the stress, the cortisol, all the stuff, the sleepless nights, all that does take its effect. The biological effect is real. But, then that's where you go, okay, can I game the system a little bit and become more of an expert on recovery and training and whatever? And it's like, can I stretch that 58 and exciting to 78 and exciting? Well, I'll take that.
Yeah.
And then of course I'm always one bigger. I'm like, well, I'm gonna be 88 and exciting. And it's like, well, why not 90 and exciting? But that's just my delusionment. But I think that's what people have to understand. It's like, it's going to be way, 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 way harder than anyone ever thought. It's like having kids, right?
Yeah.
People are like, oh man, having kids is the best thing, but it's the hardest job you'll ever do. And you're like, really? How hard could it be?
It's hard.
Right. And then you're like, oh, okay. So being totally selfless, not getting sleep, not like all the stuff. And you're like, okay, this is, but in my mind, I was like, well, every person that ever had a kid in the history of the world had to go through it. So it can't be that bad. It's freaking hard.
Yeah.
Maybe you just crush it and it's super easy, but I don't know. I think there's a reason why at least businesses, very few of them last 5 years. Like what, 95% or something like that don't last 5 years.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a second and talk to you about nutrition and supplementation. There are a plethora of options when it comes to supplements that can be kind of overwhelming, so I wanted to let you guys know what I do take. So in the mornings, I am taking the Mountain Ops greens and the collagen right when I wake up, and that has been a game changer. I don't eat a lot of vegetables throughout the day, so adding those greens in the morning is quick and efficient, and I can really feel the collagen. In addition, I do enhance my workouts. My Mountain Tough training sessions are quite difficult, and so I do like to take the Enduro. It gives you a cardio enhancement that you can actually feel. And then I also like a little caffeine with my workout, so I'm taking the Mountain Ops Ignite. Lastly, it's really important that you are getting enough protein and recovering after these difficult sessions. What I do know is even following a strict whole foods diet, I'm not getting nearly enough protein on most days unless I take a supplement. So I do take the Mountain Ops protein after my workout to make sure that I'm hitting about 1 gram per body weight for a functional athlete. So taking the Mountain Ops protein with some creatine after my workouts has been huge. Those are the products I am taking and that I recommend. The Mountain Ops team is giving Mountain Tough podcast show listeners an exclusive discount to their products. It is a great deal. So for a first-time purchase on mountainops.com, you do get 20% off. All you need to do is go to mountainops.com and then use the code MountainTough at checkout. That's MTNTOUGH, all caps, all one word. Apply that as your promo code at checkout, and you're going to get 20% off your first order. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. I know you're doing some of this, but it's like the more we could do of this, the better. And it's if we were kids and all of the teaching we were getting was, hey, you were wired for battle. As a human, you were actually meant for battles. As a human, life is actually supposed to be hard. If everything we
Yeah.
were taught growing up was life is hard, but it's supposed to be hard, you were meant for battle and you were meant to handle these battles, then I think this expectation gap wouldn't be as vast as it is, because it's the vast expectation gap that makes things feel and appear so much worse than they actually are. But I mean, we were meant to
Because
go.
the expectation is so low for what you think it's going to be. It's like, it can't be that bad. It's not, it's probably going to be that bad.
Yeah. But
That's a good, and that's like Luke Day, and I think I've talked about it before. His whole message is struggle well.
mhm,
And that's the whole thing. Life is going to be a struggle. The sooner you realize life is going to be a struggle, and then your job is to learn to struggle well, then things change. It was like when I was a kid. It's like even like okay, so like when you go hunting and it starts raining, right? And especially when you had crappy rain gear, like when we were kids.
yeah.
Like I remember like the first time, like, oh man, like you'd be cold and rainy. So you're like, I want my rain gear. It's like, and then you realize pretty quickly, like you're still going to get wet
Mhm.
and you're still going to be miserable, even if it's just the microclimate inside just gets you soaked and you get cold and whatever. And I remember feeling so like slighted that the rain gear didn't work. I'm like, no, it's raining, but you're supposed to have rain gear and it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
And then one like, oh no, you're just going to get wet. And you're like, so we're just going to get wet every time? And you're like, yeah, you're just going to kind of pretty much get wet and you're going to be miserable. That's what this is. And you're like, oh, okay. Oh, so it just
It's
sucks.
an
And you're like, yeah, it
expectation.
sucks. And you're
Yeah.
like, okay, I know I got it. And then like you could just handle it. But it's like when you have this weird expectation that everything's going to be all right, or like the first time that you're in a wrestling or boxing or football or whatever, and someone clobbers you, you're like, oh, hold on. And you're like, no, but that's what this game is. And you're
Mhm.
like, oh, okay. Then you kind of have that stress inoculation. You're like, okay, I got this. This is okay. But like kind of going back to that struggle well mantra and mentality, like we had a group, I think I told you we called it the strugglers, and it was like
Yeah.
the kids, it was my kids, Luke's kids, Josh Dobby's kids, and so we brought all the kids in the neighborhood, and they were like 7 to 12 years old at the time, and we would teach them, basic movement patterns and some of the keep in mind test, and just kind of, we talked about maximum effort, good attitude, and attentiveness, kind of being the three things that we feel that are building blocks for kids that, because most kids don't pay attention to anything. Well, the whole deal.
Yeah.
And one of the first days we're like, hey, who was told that life was going to be amazing one day? You'd meet the right girl, you'd marry the right girl, you'd have perfect this, you'd go to college, you'd get the right job or whatever. And like all the dads raised their hand, and even all the kids were like, yeah, like that's kind of what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, it's a lie. It's a lie. Like as soon as you understand that that's a lie, that there will always be struggles no matter whatever level you're in, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a ditch digger, there's always going to be struggles, and it just get used to it. And as
Mhm.
soon as you can get used to it and learn to struggle well, then everything changes, because then it becomes a workout versus,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, a bunch of 100 pounds or some hundreds of pounds on your back is trying to kill you, until you realize that it's just what you have to do today and it's going to make you stronger. Then the framing of that is all
Then
different.
it's
You're
a
like, oh,
workout.
it's not attacking me. It's not mad at me. It's just is. Okay, cool. And the more I do it, the stronger I get and the better I get and the more things I could take on. Like, okay, got it. But man, that's a hard one. And I think the people who realize that sooner than later, and I talked about this the other day too. I was thinking, sorry, going on tangents, but I was thinking about like some of the big bucks, like, on different properties on hunt. I'm like, okay, why do I always like, we see often a lot of like little whitetail world, little 4s and 6s and little basket 8s. I'm like, you
Mhm.
see those like cruise across the fields like often. I was like, why don't we see the big ones walk across the field? I'm like, two reasons. Because if they're dumb enough to do that, they were killed the first time they did it.
Yeah.
So they're not around. I go, okay. Or you don't see them because they figured out the game and they're ghosts hiding in the deepest crap ever. And I go, okay, do they figure out the game because they're the biggest? Or were those the deer when they were four pointers, again, Eastern four pointers? So
Yep.
y'all would call it a two or a one or whatever the heck y'all call
Yep.
them. Were those the ones who figured it out the earliest before they were desirable to be shot? They figured out the game. Thus, they started playing the game before the other deer did, and they went ghost when they were four pointers.
For sure.
And thus they become the ones who are the monarchs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I thought about this in human terms. I'm like, okay, the ones who, whether it be sport or business or just life in general, the ones who figure out the game the first, like the most dynamic
Earliest.
thinking ones
Yeah.
that realize what the game is, realize it's going to suck. You got to be resilient. You got to be super dynamic thinking. You have to be able to change your perspective and change your outcomes and everything like that, and figure out what the freaking game of life is the fastest, are the ones that 40 and 50 years old are generally, they're the ones that are doing good,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's very rarely the other way around. And at times I know a lot of people, I see people, I'm like, I tell my wife, I'm like, gosh, I hate to say it, they just seem to be bad at life. Like, I don't know why those people keep making the same decisions at 40 years old or whatever. And it's like, and I'm not down talking them. It's just, I don't know why some people get it and some people don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of boiled it back down to, it's like, gosh, are they just not seeing the same patterns? Are they, a deer, once it smells a person the second time and sees a truck and associates that and hears a shot and sees his buddy get killed, the deer that figures that out in one or two
Yep.
reps is the deer you're never going to kill.
Yep.
The deer that figures it out in 8 reps, you're going to kill him on rep 6. And it's just like, that's like people. The ones that aren't paying attention are typically the ones that keep struggling. And it's not that they're bad people. I just wish people would open up their eyes and start watching for patterns and make choices associated with changing their future outcomes. And that's where the dynamic thinking and the resilience piece, I believe, comes in. And that's been just something I've been thinking more and more and kind of holding myself accountable on too, is like, am I being the dumb buck that's a 150-inch deer that walks out in the middle of the field because I think everything is, if I've lulled myself into thinking everything is okay.
There is kind of a whole nother layer too on top of struggling well. I think it's actually, in addition to that, it's actually struggling is what we were made for, and struggling is actually
Yes.
what gives us value and purpose in life, because there are the people that are always struggling, but there also is another group, almost the masses sometimes, that is living a life of mediocrity and passivity and complacency because they have very little struggle in their life. So that's going to be someone in a job that they don't like, but it pays well. That's going to be, the trust fund side. Those people generally, they have no happiness in their life, and they're just eliminating all struggle from the table. And they thought that eliminating struggle from the table was the right path. But I think
Mhm.
flipping that switch of, we need to learn how to struggle well, but we also need to know that, like, struggle is the key to a purpose-filled life.
Yes. And intentional struggles generally minimize unintentional struggles, right?
Yeah.
Like the ones, I see those people that don't have a lot of struggles in their life. They have struggles, they're just seen differently.
Mm-hmm.
Their addiction or alcoholism or like all these other, low self-esteem. There are all these others. You're going to struggle one way or the other. And I think that's the thing, is to take into account, like, you could either be a part of a narrator of what your struggle is going to be, or you're just going to be washed around because you have no hand on the wheel of what it is, and you're going to deal with them regardless. It's either going to be a cause or an effect. And I'd prefer to choose my struggle in, like I said before, like a streamlined hardship. Like I could kind of figure out what these struggles are going to be because they're going to make me better. So I do get, a better outcome on the other side of it, versus just, hey, I'm not going to stress myself at all, but I'm then later going to struggle with diabetes and being overweight and depression and all these other things I don't have a choice for.
For sure. Yeah,
You're going to pay the bill one way or the other. Like
for
it's what
sure.
it boils down.
Yeah. With Sorinex, I'm going to assume that over your 25 years, you've gone through a lot of crisis moments. You've gone through a lot of struggle. And I'm going to guess that, the top two are always of something financial or something people related.
Yeah.
Like the massive biggest kind of struggles you've gone through in that 25-year history is probably like the worst ones, the hardest ones were either financial or people related. Is that accurate?
Or both.
Yeah. Same
Or both.
time.
If you could superset it where they hit at the same time, man, that's a wild ride.
Man.
It ain't it's not for the faint of heart. It's yeah, for me it was 2005, but had a multitude of issues. So I just came off of my attempting to make the Olympic team in 2004. So I was coming to an end of my official athletic career. So there was there's a feeling like, hey, I didn't get the job done, and there's a little bit of remorse, and there's a little bit of like, hey, I'm walking away from a lifestyle and what I poured into for years, over a decade, and feeling like, a sense of inadequacy. And then my grandmother passed, and I was the kind of the person who ran all that. So I was like, so from a stressor standpoint, that's a personnel hit. And then right after that, my dad got prostate cancer. And
Mm,
so we didn't know how that was going to shake out. So, the company is two people, and now 50% of the workforce is, questionable from a health standpoint. Um, and then it also, one of our major producers, uh, kind of, not to just speak ill, but there was an issue there.
mm,
So we lost one of our major shops that were producing for us. The building that we were in tied in with the gym. They went a different direction, so we had no brick and mortar, um, and we were a few $100,000 in the hole with bills 60 days.
man.
Uh, so yeah, all of it. You put two or three personal ones in, you put financial, you put uh, all of it.
It all
I mean, everything, like everything you could think of hit in like a 6 month period of time.
when it rains, it
And
pours.
yeah, and that was one of those like, you know, I'm running Sorinex off of my dad's kitchen counter at his house while we're taking care of him while he's coming back and off of surgery and everything, and then working there during the day, and at night going into the new building, and then building it out ourselves, meeting ourselves, meaning me and whoever my workout partners I could convince to help me out, put up
Mm,
drywall and do all the stuff, put down flooring, and work till about 11 o'clock at night. Um, Pay them with sub sandwiches that you run up your credit card to pay for them.
man.
Uh, Give people lifetime memberships to the gym if they'll help out. Doing that stuff, and then and you don't know, like, and then we're out of cash, and then my dad dumps in, so he just comes off of a life-threatening illness. So we still don't know if he was going to be clean. And then he dumps in his life savings to make sure, the company keeps going. And then you have your dad who you're looking at, that was at '05. So I've been, 25 years in. And he's like, hey, I trust you. I think you could, help, you could pull this back. And like, if you could ever, repay me back, like that would be great. So like,
The
there's the
pressure.
pressure on like, okay, my dad just dumped in his life savings, and I might lose him, and I somehow have to figure out how to make the business work while repaying my dad personally back and paying our bills and making sure he survives. And I just remember like the pressure was so high, and I didn't have anyone to talk to. I didn't have any, it was just like, you just go to work and you're like, okay, um, start making calls, like do
Man.
the stuff, like just do the stuff every freaking day. And I remember thinking like, from a standpoint of business, but also like for my dad, like the mantra was, don't die today.
Hmm.
Like, don't go out of business today.
Yeah.
Dad, don't die today. like, I don't know what tomorrow's going to be for any of us.
Mm,
Like, just don't die today. Keep standing. You can't die on your feet. And so if we're still swinging, if we're still calling, if we're still, billing and building equipment and all that stuff, then we're not dead yet.
yeah.
And so, okay, like that, this is good. We made it good. We made it through today. All right, let's see what tomorrow looks like. And then that day was like, all right, don't die today.
Wow.
And, you do that for months, maybe a year. I mean, that was '05, early '05, late 4. I don't really remember much from '05 or '06. So I would assume it was probably a while there, just like that whole era. I just remember we were in a building and it sucked. And I remember dad came back kinda,
Man. So it was probably
and it's just like,
2 or 3 years struggle.
yeah. But there was at no point that it's weird thinking now. It was like, at no point did we think we were going to quit. Like I was not going to go do something else. I would maybe be forced to go do something else because everyone, the banks and everyone would just shut us down and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But that was never really, it's weird now. It's almost kind of stupid to even think of that. It's like, man, at no point was I thinking of an exit plan. Like that was just, no, this is what we do. Because I knew I had to pay dad back somehow.
Yeah.
It wasn't a ridiculous amount of money, but it was enough where like it would have sure helped him out, but I knew if he wasn't, and then he started getting paid like half salary to help us, and I went without salary for a while, and it's like, okay, like let's just do what we got to do. But that turned around eventually, and then it was like, don't die this week, don't die this month, don't die this quarter, and then you kind of grow a little bit, and you're like, hey, like we had a pretty good year.
Man.
Okay, cool. And then in about '07, we invented the base camp rack and the rig, like the rig concept as it's known in the industry now.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then, I wouldn't say things took off by any means. We then had a truly differentiated product that I would humbly argue changed the face of what gyms look like.
Yeah.
And but it was still like we didn't have a marketing team. We didn't have multiple. I mean, there's like still me and Pops. So we didn't have like, a great website. We didn't have, I mean, it was before social media. So you didn't have any of that. You didn't have a YouTube page. It was just like you're just calling coaches trying to convince them that this thing with a butt ton of holes in it is a better option. And everyone eventually originally is like, I don't like all the holes. I think it looks cheap.
Oh man.
I don't understand it. This is dumb looking. And I'm like, yeah, but do you understand the holes give you ultimate customization for the first time ever in the industry? Whatever you could come up with will work. And a few people got it and most didn't.
Hmm.
And then it's like, you get a couple good jobs and then, people go, okay, hey, maybe this will work. And the first customer he ever had that bought into it, that trusted it, was Bill Gillespie at Liberty University, and he had the predecessor of that when we were playing with the concept of holes in all four sides of the tubing that which created the kind of entire genre. And then in '07-ish, Nick Garcia at Notre Dame High School said, "Yep, like let's do it." And then after that, it was Luke Richardson at the Jacksonville Jags and Craig Fitzgerald at University of South Carolina. And then it was like, that's
Oh.
when everyone goes, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. Like you could just kind of do anything, but it was when you see 20 of them in a line at a big SEC football
Oh,
school, and
yeah.
it's like, okay, this is accepted vernacular within the community now. But that wasn't until, gosh, '08, '09, and so that's a couple years in, and then it was still like reformatting the entire industry over the next 6 to 7 years.
Do you think,
Is just winning jobs slowly, and then now the neat part is you have a full, at least a generation of coaches that's what they know a rack looks like.
man?
People forget like that wasn't a thing. And so now you get anyone in their 30s are like, well, yeah, I grew up on a rig or a rack. You're like, yeah, So yeah, that was an interesting part. But I mean, that's and one of the things, in my opinion, that saved us. Like that was, that was a blessing, for sure.
I've used a ton of Bluetooth speakers over the years, and they all have never quite had enough output for me to really have an awesome home gym workout on a Bluetooth speaker. But the Turtle Box is in a whole new ball game. They have leveled up this product, so the bass and the output you get out of a Turtle Box is quite amazing. It's funny how we started using them at the lab. We had an awesome sound system at our new lab here in Bozeman. We were using it so much, we actually blew our brand new system out. We went right to the Turtle Boxes. And so we paired two together in the lab. And that was a lot of output for the Mountain Tough team and all of our testing to have phenomenal sound in our gym for a great workout with great music. We know there's a ton of Mountain Toughers training in their basements, in their garages, and I know a lot of you are looking for great sound to play some music in the background to your MGDs or your kettlebell diesel. This is a great product for you to check out. Turtle Box is at a whole new level. The bass and the volume you can get out of that box. It's a sweet product. You guys can check them out at turtleboxaudio.com. Again, that's turtleboxaudio.com. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. When you look at it now, do you think the struggle created the rig? Because you, like, through the struggle, you had to innovate. Like when we're over blessed with abundant resources, that desire to innovation is not the same as like, we got to come up with something.
Yeah, and I didn't honestly see it as we got to come up with something to survive in business. It was just, honestly, it was partially, I was one guy doing most of the custom builds, and I realized that every customer, and I will say usually our colleges, but even like regular guys in gyms, places like yours, they all wanted something a little bit different. They all would like, well, I want my band pegs, at 7 feet high. And the next guy would say, well, I don't like them that high. They hit me in the eye. I wish they were at 7 feet 3. And like, I want to have metal plates. I want to have 45, 35, 25, 10, 5, 10, 2.5. And the next guy was like, well, I hate 35s. I wish these pins weren't here. And it was like, finally one day I was like, I'm getting driven crazy on like making these custom things. And then the customer orders again. And if you didn't have really great records of exactly what they wanted, it was almost impossible to match it because you're making a painting for them basically every time. It's like making a custom rifle.
Yeah.
It's like, you're drilling and tapping this rifle for these mounts and this whatever versus like, here's a Picatinny rail.
Exactly.
Put it wherever you want.
Yeah.
And so that's really what it was within the industry. It was kind of the Picatinny rail. So it was partly, it allowed me to fulfill the coach's needs, but also with a little flexibility in case whatever they got, they didn't really love. And they could tweak it and change it to make it exactly what they wanted. So it made my job easier in some ways, but also eliminated a lot of problems that were just inherent to the art.
Yeah.
So one day I literally wrote down, a power rack has to do all of these things. It is really nice if they did all of these things. Here are the things that are absolutely terrible about racks that should be changed. And here's some really interesting things that I don't even know if that's a thing, but here's brainstorming. And it was like weeks of just listing things and brainstorming every possible scenario and then going, okay, that is the problem set. How do you create something that solves this problem set that has all the things that a rack does? And then for years, all a rack did, holds a barbell, 4 feet off the ground for a squat and 3 feet off the ground for a bench and 2.5 feet off the ground for an RDL, and it holds plates.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it has to do those things, and it has to have a chin bar on it, and it has to be this, and it has to do that. It's like, yeah, but what if you want to start wrapping bands around it sideways and doing some different force vector stuff there? Well, then you got to get away from the slot system because the slot system is going to tear up your bands. And then, and you started just kind of like, and what I eventually landed on was like 1 1/16 holes, every 2 inches on center, all four sides, all the hardware is the same. It was the first rack that all the hardware and all the accessories were all the same diameter. That no one had used 1 inch bolts in the industry before.
Crazy.
And so we had to get them from like bridge companies because no one, like, it was hard to find them. So it was like, but if you could bolt anything in any direction, everything works
Mhm.
as long as you have two wrenches. And then if you have everything works, there will be things that are invented that no one's even conceived of right now because everything would work.
Man.
And then that was that last column that we started playing with. It was like, oh, lat pulls on there, cable columns on there, dip bars on there, and then you see what the industry is now. I mean, there's some companies pop up and all they do is aftermarket things that lock onto a 3x3 tubing with 1 1/16 holes, 2 inches on center and all four sides.
It's
Like that is
incredible.
their job.
Yeah.
But the hard part was the original figuring that out. Like the simple solution was actually like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Um, so that was kind of one of those weird things. I don't know if that was, God blessing us with the clarity to see kind of the industry of maybe what it could be, or
Mhm.
I don't know. And then that was right when the war was really popping off pretty hard, and CrossFit was a thing, and I would watch CrossFits and I would go, man, everyone's welding together these weird rigs and having their buddy weld them. And none of them were painted because they couldn't weld them painted. So they'd have these raw rigs. And as soon as, what if a good CrossFit, what does it does? What does it do? It expands and goes to a bigger space. And that would always happen. I'd watch these people that started in 200 square feet. They weld a rig in there, and then they would they cut it apart or they throw it away and they'd weld another one in the next place. And I was like, man, there has to be like a system of uprights and crossbars that people could build into whatever they wanted, like
Mhm.
an erector set that all was infinitely customizable for any gym, no matter if you're upsizing, downsizing, selling off parts. And then the war was cracking off. And I was like, man, if we could do this, we could ship pallets of uprights and cross members over to the sandbox,
Yep.
and guys could set them up on fobs. They could run them easy. They could do multitude of things. They won't get left, because what was happening, they were buying regular weightlifting equipment. And as soon as they would leave that base, they would just leave it there. I heard people say they would just take bulldozers and dig holes and dump equipment in the sand and just cover it up.
Crazy.
They're like, we just leave it. And I'm like, well, that's wasteful. I was like, well, if it was able to be broken down, palletized, shipped to another fob or whatever, like you could use this stuff for a zillion different uses for forever.
Mhm.
The original rig, actually, I made it in black, which is what the industry ended up doing, but I had it in tan, so it wasn't as hot in the overseas. And I had it in the same green that was a thermal, it was a thermal OD green that they used like on ammo cans, that so it was actually, it reflected heat so it didn't get as hot, because I didn't
Dang.
want guys to burn their hands when they were doing chin-ups.
Dang.
And so that was like in '08 maybe. And that was the original. So the base fit line was made in OD, tan and black. And I had that at Dave Castro's house at the CrossFit Games. That was where the first place a rig was ever shown at the '08 CrossFit Games, the year Khalipa won.
Dang.
And so that first rig was at his place, and I flew out there and bolted it together, and everyone kind of looked at it like, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
Remember the CrossFit guys going, okay, this is cool, but do you make squat stands? And I was like, well, yeah, there are squat stands. And they're like, where? And I was like, the uprights. You put J cups in. They're like, oh, do y'all make pull-up bars? And I'm like, they are pull-up bars. And they're like, huh? And it was just wild that it was so different that people just looked at it like it was this weird jungle gym and they didn't know what to do with it. It had places for rings. It had a box step up that was like bolted to it as an integral part of the frame that could be set at 2 inch increments, of course, at 20 inch or whatever. So then you didn't have to buy
Step up
jump boxes.
boxes. Yeah.
So like it was all this whole thing, but I remember like people used it for the warm up area, but no one was truly sure of what the heck this thing was. And it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. And after the games, some of the old heads at CrossFit, like Tony Blauer, Tony Budding, Castro, and a couple other dudes, they all broke up that original rig and all took parts of it home.
Just parts of
And so
it.
like that was where the first ones ended up.
That is wild. I mean,
Yeah, kind of crazy.
yeah, revolutionized an industry. And like all great ideas, it's so normal for us now to see them. It's so normal for us to use them, and it looks so simple. But until it's created, you don't realize how bad you need it. Just like all great
Yeah.
ideas.
Well, I appreciate it. But it was one of those you just kind of finally stumbled onto it, and it was just like, how did we not think of that?
Yeah.
Like, how is this? And to have so much pushback, the CrossFit community picked it up relatively quickly, but the athletic community still, like, it took a minute.
Mm.
But because they saw a rack as squats, pull-ups, benches, RDLs, or cleans. Like, that is what a rack does. And there's like, but what if we could store stuff on it? What if we could do accessories? What if we could do recovery stuff? What if that we're the first people to put a set of rollerblade wheels on a bolt? And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, well, because when I would lay on a darn ball, I'd roll around. I couldn't put enough pressure on it. And I was a big guy, so I couldn't really dig in. I was like, well, gosh, I need to be able to jam up against something
Mm-hmm.
and get on a knot. I'm like, well, I'm tired of chasing balls around the place. Or big athletes, littler guys would have a problem, but 300-pound linemen weren't going to lay on the ground and roll around. It was hard for them. So we designed the trigger bar and the trigger roller. It's like, well, it needs to lock onto a rack wherever you want it, and you could get in. And so that was always like, we were just training, and it was just kind of like the simplest solution kind of just kept opening itself up.
Man. And then the innovation continues.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even like the glute ham roller, probably our best selling piece of all time. And our lead designer, when he started lifting probably 11 years ago, 12 years ago, he started working here. And I was like, hey, man, you'll be better at this job if you lift weights also. Cause he's like good at, like, he wasn't a lead designer at that point. He was just in the shop.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, man, if you get into this, like, you'll be better at your job, thus more valuable. And he's like, okay. So he started lifting. And then one day he was like, hey, man, I want to do some more things for hamstrings. What would be a good lift? And I was like, well, I'm like looking around the gym. I was like, yeah, you could use these valve slides. They're okay. And I was like, yeah, you could use a Swiss ball, but when you're rolling, you kind of roll downhill and the ball rolls, and
Yeah.
it kind of gives you a free concentric, and that doesn't really work good. And I was like, we used to use these kind of wheelie things with universal wheels, but when you go forward and backward, the wheels kind of kick sideways when they go back and forth, and that was kind of dumb. And so I walked past a scrap of metal, and I pulled some metal out of a thing, and I was like, drill these 4 holes. And we drilled the holes. I threw the rollerblade wheels in it. The V piece in the middle was literally a piece of scrap that I walked by, and I go, that's about the right length.
Well,
And I was like, weld these up.
and then your heels fall right in
And I
that
laid
V.
on the ground, and that was that. And we hooked our heels. I was like, if you could hook your heels in with the hips extended like this,
Yeah.
it's a better contraction. And because the wheels are unidirectional, the amortization phase will be faster. And I was like, try this. And never thought to sell it. It was just, so he was doing that. And then I came the next day and I was like, weld a bar on it so we could do upper body stuff on it too.
Yeah.
And then eventually we're like, well, weld 2 bars on it, because who knows, maybe it'll be neat. And then the design has not changed in 11 years.
Oh, that is wild.
It's crazy. But for me, that's the fun.
Yeah.
That's the digging up a piece of gold out of like a parking lot. It's like, I don't know, like, what does it need to do? Okay, well, and then you figure out, like, sometimes it's the most complicated way to solve the problem, which is what the original rack design was. It was like the most complicated way to do, and that's where we were as the state of the art. It was, if I want to do all the things a rack could do, all the things I want it to do, and what is this complicated mess of nonsense? And that's what it was. It was 50 different accessory and like all this crap. And you're like, all right, the brilliance of this is if you could standardize this, if you could make it all the same language,
Yeah.
and make it from similar parts and make it like unidirectional, like really simplify it. That's where the brilliance, in my opinion, always has been, is those who could take something really, really, really complex, but great, and then turn it into like the Oh my gosh, how did we not think of that?
Yeah, that's how all great ones are. It's like
Yeah.
those steps in the new truck so you can step into the box and grab something out of the bed of your truck. Like we should have had that 30 years ago.
Or like Brian Morgan teaching how to shoot.
Yeah.
If you know Brian Morgan, like in Hat Creek, it's just like you've simplified you've taken all these crazy things and you make it so simple. Coaching cues, those are the best coaching cues, right? If
Yeah.
someone could really teach it clean in like 3 cues or less, you're like, oh, okay, you got it. I mean, Mike Schrock used to teach. It was great. So he's a legendary strength coach down here. I know you've been in Summer Strong, you've seen him. And so in his feeder system before the kids got to high school, he would teach them in like fifth, sixth, seventh grade, no barbell. Everything was all it was extension, ready position. So he would get the kids, he'd be like, ready position. They'd pop into a ready position, ready position, ready position. So for years, they just knew that's how you started every drill. So when they would start a drill, they would go ahead, they'd hit a ready position, then they do the drill. So he's like, they've had tens of thousands of ready positions
Yeah.
in their life before they play the first sport. And then extension was just triple extension all the way through,
Huh.
a jump or whatever. And I said, well, how did that work? He goes, the first day of ninth grade, I put a bar in their hand. I go, extend, ready position. And they go, whack, whack. And they catch it. And I go, great, let's move on.
That's
I'm just like,
just so simple.
really, so simple, but it's, and then it's like, okay, get the elbows up, like little minor tweaks, but you're just like, the kids all know the two things. It's it's an extension into a ready position is the catch.
Oh man.
Why are we making this more difficult? And that was where I so am attracted to people who could just boil down the essence of something, even if it's a 90% solution.
Mm-hmm.
Man, you could get going really quick off a 90% solution with 2 cues. You will get a lot of people doing the right thing in a good direction.
Yeah.
So like that stuff is always neat.
Yeah. That's so cool.
Sorry, I went down the rabbit hole on that one.
No, that was great. I do want to shift into kind of how we started. And you start with that story of Pops and how you could see that stress on him, which gave you that desire to help. With the family life now, how much do you think the kids are seeing stress on you, and how are you managing that?
My kids are starting to become pretty emotionally tuned in, which part of me, I really like that they have empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And then part of me feels like in some ways I might be passing on some stress to them, which I don't know if the jury's still out if I am okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
Part of me likes to have them just be little kids and not have to live my life yet. But the other part, I kind of came in yesterday and it's just like, I think I got in at 8 p.m. and it was just like, I'm still buzzing, right? I'm still like, I'm walking through the door, like texting people back and like just trying to, because as you well know, this monster will eat.
Mm-hmm.
It will eat all you could feed it. If I was people like, I laugh, they go, hey man, shoot me a call if you're bored. I just laugh. I go, I will never, ever talk to you again in my life. If that is the stipulation,
Yeah.
or when you got nothing to do, give me a call. Man, I haven't been bored since the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've always had too much on my plate, which probably isn't good. But that being said, as you well know, with our lifestyle or our business, it will eat all you could feed it.
For sure.
If you could somehow stay up 24 hours a day, you will never get ahead. Like you just have to I realize forever I will have unanswered emails in my box. I try, it's just where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I walk through the door and then Ezra walks up to me immediately. He's like, Daddy, you okay? You okay? And then I appreciate that he is attentive enough to see like what's on my heart or my body language.
Energy.
But also there's a part of me goes, man, should I be shielding some of this from him where he doesn't have to deal with it? Or should I be much more present and clear my palate when I walk through the door? I'm 100% good dad, loving dad, all the stuff that we are on our best days. And I wrestle with that because I think there's evidence to support either way. I think do I want my kids to live this cherry little life and dad walks in and they all run to me and it's the greatest. Yes, I'd love that. How well am I setting them up for life if they think that's what every day is?
Mm-hmm.
If they don't see the stress at times and understand like, hey, you need to ask someone how they're doing and see if they could actually help.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could help them. And so for me, the managing of all that is difficult at often because I'm going to leave something on the table. I'm going to leave a relationship or with a kid, my kids, my wife, my friends, my business, my customers, my associates. Like someone's going to get a raw deal.
Yeah.
I've just realized that I've had to kind of like, well, like there's always going to be struggle. There's always going to be disappointment in some way. And I'm a people pleaser, so I never want anyone to be disappointed in me or
Mm-hmm.
my brand or anything that's associated with me because I know I truly never try to hurt anyone. So that's hard for me because I realize that there will be shrapnel and a probably a negative experience for someone every single day of my life.
Yeah.
And it's something good. And it's not intentional. And I ask that they don't get too wrapped around the axle of what it means or doesn't mean. It's just where we are.
Yeah.
And that's a hard one to metabolize that because then the feeling of like constant failure, even if it's micro failures or sometimes it's macro failures. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's huge. The oh my gosh, I can't believe I missed that, or I can't believe I came across that way to that person. That's not what I expected, not what I meant.
Those are hard.
That I take very seriously. But I'm trying to wrap my mind around like, hey, you could just do what you could do. And if people know you enough to know your heart is truly not out to do anything wrong to them and it's just an inadequacy to meet expectations. If you still like me after that, I appreciate it. And if you don't, then hey, I don't blame you.
Mm.
Like I've had to kind of start like wrapping my mind around that. It's just because otherwise I was stressing too much and driving myself crazy. And I say was, I'm trying to use those terms to try to convince myself to not do it anymore.
Yeah.
Reality of it is the main stress I feel in life is letting people down. It's, as my schedule fills up, it's for me, commitment to schedule is like really stressful for me
Mm-hmm.
because I know I'm saying no to someone or something.
Yeah.
If I say yes to this, I'm saying no to this. I know I'm doing it. And, talking about like getting to compete,
Yeah.
together. Super exciting, but I'll be honest, it's 2 or 3 days of going, okay, I'm letting my employees down by not being here.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm letting my kids down and I'm immediately going, well, gosh, can I fly them out there? And well, no, they won't have anything to do. Like, what am I? But I'm going to be away from them, or am I going to be letting my employees down that need me? But like, I want to be there with Dustin, and I want to be there with the SIG guys. And like, and there's, then you tell yourself, well, there's some business opportunity here, so then like maybe I am doing a good job for my company,
Yeah.
or should I be doing this for my company? And is that a better servant of yes, I own it, but I still serve it. Like that's my job is to make my employees' life better. And like, but I feel like when anytime I do something for me, I'm choosing to put my wants on a pedestal versus those around me. And that's really, really hard for me. And it sounds like, crying with a ham under each arm, crying about bread, but it is difficult. It's difficult, like prioritizing and deciding who you get to let down that day.
It's
And that's
tough.
freaking,
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you experience that?
Yeah, I feel like we're wired really, really similar in that regard. And
Yeah.
you kind of get beat up with guilt from both sides, and you're just balancing that guilt. And there's the guilt at home with the family, and then
Yeah.
if you lean too hard that direction, then you kind of get overwhelmed with guilt from the business and the brand and the employees. And so it's
Yeah.
a lot of days it's kind of like you're just kind of picking your guilt because you're gonna feel it on one side or the other, which is tough. It's really tough.
Pick your guilt. Pick your guilt, man. You nailed, yeah, that's it. That's it. And then there's the parts like the things that maybe truly are for you. And then that's easy to rationalize and go, man, like I do so much for my community, or I attempt to, and I try to serve my company or serve my family. And man, I really want to go on a mule deer hunt. I really want to, like, that consumes my thoughts when I'm not thinking of these other things. And then you go, do I deserve that? Because there's some people who go, yeah, man, you deserve that. And you're like, but do I?
Yeah.
I know I want it. I know I really, really want that. And, then there's the easy to rationalize, well, gosh, I've become successful and I've done all these things. And don't I get a little time for me and mental health and all the things? And, and I'll be honest, like some of those like dreams are what fuels or the muse for fueling the next thing or fueling the passion. That, like, if I don't have something to train for, we came up with the best equipment in the eras when I was training for something.
Yeah.
Because that's what my mind was.
Hands on.
Right. Hands on. You're like, I got to flip over every rock. I'm going to go off in the deep end and solve it in ways that the industry never seen before. Well, if there's not a fight to have or a struggle to have or a problem to solve, then you get dull, right? So part of me is like, when you ask me to compete, scary, yeah, because I'm competing with you and another guy who's a total beast, and it's like, I don't want to let you guys down. So there's the fear of letting someone down. The fear, if I do it, that I'm letting other people down by not being around. But it was, hey, I really want to do this. I want to test myself. But then when I came to the other side of that was, oh, I get to have a battle to train for now.
Yeah.
I like a thing I'm going after now. And what I do know is if I do that, I get better. Other good things happen peripherally. And so then it's like, okay, the juice is worth the squeeze, because I know I'll come out after that competition. My skills will be better. My relationships will be better with certain people. I will have learned things. I've maybe have pushed things in the business in a different way. Then it's like, okay, then this is worth it. It's worth it. This elk hunt I want to go on this year. Okay, this will be worth it if I put the prep into it. And then it's like, then I could afford leaving for 5 days now, because I've done all the background work that has made this rise all the ships. And now it's okay. And that's, whether that's right or wrong, that's how I basically metabolize it and try to make the balance sheet add up. Whether it does or not, I don't know.
It's hard. Mountain Tough is the fitness app trusted by the dedicated. Mountain Tough ethos is backed by, we've always wanted to be the best in the world at helping our customers become more mentally tough. So inside the Mountain Tough app, you're not only going to find all of our physical training programs, but you're going to find additional training as well, so that you can stay sharp physically, mentally, spiritually, and nutritionally. The Mountain Tough app also allows you to train no matter where you are, anytime, anywhere. Additionally, the Mountain Tough app is going to have programs from beginners all the way up to elite athletes. And all of our programming is structured in a way that you can start with no gear at body weight, and you can go all the way up to programming that is full gear. So you can do that in a robust home gym or your local gym. There's no excuse for you not to start today. With Mountain Tough, you can conquer your goals with the ideal program for your lifestyle and schedule. Train with equipment or just your body weight on your phone, tablet, TV, or web browser. Most importantly, Mountain Tough will help you train your mindset so you are always ready for anything life throws your way. Mountain Tough is offering the Mountain Tough podcast listeners an incredible offer. 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. All you need to do is use the code MTNPOD to redeem your 6 weeks of training. That'll be a 14-day free trial plus a whole additional 4 weeks of training. Just go to mountaintough.com and enter code MTNPOD for your 6 weeks free on the best-in-class physical and mental training app. listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. I think you're spot on because it is that Spartan effect when you sign up and register for something a little scary, a little hard, then that positive snowball does start to build. As a founder and owner and as a CEO and a boss, not everyone understands that though. So like your team is going to think you're just flying out to Montana for a couple of sweet days shooting guns, and they're not going to always understand that larger picture of what is going on behind the scenes, which I think it is okay. I mean, you can explain it the best that you can, but I feel you probably feel this way sometimes. I'm terrible at this because I'm a big people pleaser as well, but sometimes you just envy some masters at their craft that don't really care what anyone else thinks. And you look at those guys and you're like, man, it's got to be so freeing to not really care what anyone else is thinking about you.
Gosh, it is a fantasy of mine. I was listening to the Rogan podcast with Kid Rock on it today on the way to work, and the guy just like seems like he just doesn't care.
Yeah.
He's just like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I don't have a publicist. I don't have a media person. Like, whatever comes across my head, I just say it. And I'm like, man, that must be nice.
Oh, it's got to be nice.
Yeah. And, is it like, oh, he's that? Well, it's easy. Oh, he has $1 zillion in the bank and whatever. But he kind of made a point. He goes, this is who I've been since day one. Mm-hmm. I didn't care what anyone thought when I started. And you're like, just in you, huh? Like, and you're going to piss off an enormous amount of people, and you're going to inspire an enormous amount of people. And are you just built for it?
Yeah.
And I don't know if I am.
It's got to.
In fact,
it's got to be in his DNA to be that deep.
Yeah, but man, I'm inspired by it because I'm like, gosh, like, what is the worst thing if I piss off a lot of people? Like, I'm gonna piss off people anyway, I guess. Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's wild, man.
It's wild. So, in closing, I do want to be respectful of your time today. But when did you guys?
It's great to get to hang out with you, man. However long you need.
It's been awesome. When did you guys make that transition to homeschool?
Oh yeah, that was this past year. We were in a great school. Like, they did an awesome job, and there's a high probability that we'll go back there at some point. But what I found was I was losing my kids, and it was it was a pretty involved school, which is great. I'm not into a lack of stress from that perspective, mm-hmm. But I was finding that the mornings were very stressful. It's a long journey to drive to get there, which I actually kind of liked because I got to spend time with my kids, mm-hmm. taking them. But I was finding like the pace of it, we were losing the love for one another and the patience with one another, and the stress of it was bringing out the worst. It was come home and there was, fifth grader having an hour or two of homework every night after a basher of a day. And it's like, hold on a minute. Like, I want to go fishing with my kid.
Yeah.
I want to go in the kayak. I want to lift weights and show them how to do this. I want to go out to the farm and shoot guns. And like, what I started realizing was like, we had no time. They had no time to be kids, and I had no time to be a real dad to them versus, if I get home at 6 o'clock and they got homework until 7 o'clock, we eat dinner. And it's like, guys, you got to go to bed. And I'm like, I didn't have kids to hang out with them for a minute and a half and then yell at them to hurry up, get it, go. And then they're mad and I'm mad and everyone is like, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
So that was like, hey, let's control what we can control a little bit better, at least give it a shot. Reduce the stress in the household, actually be able to teach them other skills, maybe a little bit more soft skills, empathy, reading a room. Now I could lay in bed with my kids, read them a book, or we just talk about how the day was. And then we could actually literally get into conversation about what the kid in church that was bullying some people,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think he's going through in life? What did you do about it? What did the other kid do about it? Like all this stuff. And then, like, in my opinion, talk about real things that actually format their brain in ways that we now, could I have done a better job when they were in school? Yes, but the time stamp of it was not happening. And then, like, okay, what if I'm going to go to the TAC and we get to go do some amazing things, but that's in the summer, so that's not really doesn't count. But let's say we
Bring
were
them.
doing University of Alabama's football weight room
Yep.
and wanted to take my oldest down there to help me out opening boxes and this and that and see, meet Nick Saban and like see this amazing thing. And I can't do that because we can't take him out of school for an extra 2 days.
Yeah.
It's like, really? Or you have, amazing people stay at your house, or like for the first few years of Winter Strong, they didn't come the first day because they had school. And I'm like,
Oh man.
now,
Yeah.
sure, I started just keeping them out of school after a while, but at first it was like, hold on, like people are coming here to get fed all this great information. And what I really want my kids to learn is about community and all of these pieces of the puzzle. And unfortunately, the typical schooling, although it was good, was hampering us from being able to do that. So we're trying it out. We're trying it out. But part of it is nice because it's like, hey, I want, one of my kids to come to work with me one day and help, learn to file stuff,
Yep.
learn to do this, learn to work in the shop, learn to just be around adults that are high performing and not be with, I hate to say, a bunch of fifth graders that are worried about TikTok and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and YouTube and all this other stuff. And it's not that I'm trying to fully keep my kids away from everything, because I do believe exposure is important.
Yep.
I will put my foot down at some point what they're being exposed to. Like, I don't see, I know what I was exposed to at that age, and I don't necessarily want my kids to be exposed to it. I don't think their brains are
Mm-hmm.
developed enough to take on those, let's say seeing pornography for the first time doesn't need to be in second grade.
Man. Yeah.
But that is a micro trauma or a true trauma that a kid shouldn't have to deal with.
Yeah. With
You're like, yeah, well, you got to teach them sex ed. They got to learn sometime. Yeah, not at 8. Not at 8. There's no, in my opinion, there's no reason that a sex talk needs to be occurring at an age that is so far in front of puberty, and there's no appropriate way or reason we should be talking about
for
this
sure.
or be exposed to it. So things like that. It's like, I ain't playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing it. I'm not going to have, kids with, in fourth and fifth grade with phones and can access anything. It's hard enough for an adult, with the barrage of things with a mature brain, much less one that is, you know, pretty still spongy and taking everything in, and you're inducing, micro traumas on a consistent basis. Or, I was listening to podcasts the other day. They said, well, all this stuff with kids and, with, suicide and depression and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I hate to say it, my kids haven't exhibited any of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
None. None. They're riding their bikes outside. They're whacking each other with, PVC pipe lightsabers, jumping on a trampoline. Like, they don't know anything about that crap. They've
Mm-hmm.
never been on TikTok. They don't know what that is. They've been on YouTube to watch like a couple videos. They don't have a phone. They don't have iPads. They're like, well, they're going to be bad at computers. I'm sure they'll pick it up.
Yep.
Like, when it's appropriate, I think it'll be fine. I'd rather have kids with, dirty little feet and freaking leaves stuck in their hair and like just being little kids as long as humanly possible, because this world is going to come at them hard and fast, and probably not in the best ways eventually. And I personally don't think my kids were ready to take on those traumas
Mm.
like I took on some as a kid. I don't know what your childhood was like, whatever, but I lived in a neighborhood. There was good kids in the neighborhood, there's bad kids in the neighborhood, and hey, I turned out all right, but there's certain things I really wish I wouldn't have been exposed to.
For sure.
So that's kind of the idea about the homeschooling. And we have some really awesome neighbors, and they're homeschooled too, and they're like super cool, dynamic kids. And so, our kids are on the zip line together and riding bikes and out on kayaks and freaking exploring islands. And it's like, I'm all right with that.
Yeah.
My 7-year-old could tell you every single bird that's in North America. He'll be fine.
He'll be fine for sure.
He'll be fine. Or at least it'll be a great hunting guide.
Yeah, we're going into so this is our fourth year of homeschool at our house. And
What is your experience?
it is, it's been really, really cool because we didn't necessarily think we were going to be a homeschool family. We made the decision in COVID. My oldest had gone to first grade and was going into second. And then my youngest was about to enter kindergarten for the very first time, kind of in the
Sure.
heat of all that COVID stuff. And that's when we started talking about it. And, there was the previous stereotypes from my life of homeschool kids being socially awkward and not having any social skills. And so until that COVID disaster, I had never really thought about it much. I thought, Montana public schools are generally excellent and it was going to be a great option. But
Right.
really, I drew the line in the sand where I was not going to send my 6-year-old daughter to kindergarten for the first time in a mask. That was a line I was not crossing. And so that's when we pulled back, and our homeschool strategy at first was, this is an interim solution.
Yep.
We're going to do this as an interim solution to get through this weird season that the country's going through, and then we'll probably be back in the same school. But it changed a lot. It's been one of the most inspiring, coolest things we've ever done. My wife ended up loving it way more than we even thought she would originally. There definitely is good days and bad days, but
Yep.
the flexibility of it has been phenomenal. Like, we don't have that travel time like you were talking about. That commute time's gone. And what a lot of public schools were doing in like a 8 to 3 day and 8 to 4 day, the actual curriculum of that you can knock out in like 1 or 2 hours sometimes.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
Which is wild. So like
Wild. Yeah.
the curriculum that they do, they can get done from like 9 to 11, and then they can play outside, jump on the trampoline, run around the yard. But that same 2 hours of curriculum that they're doing is putting them ahead of their public school peers from an educational perspective. And it's been awesome. They come into work several days a week. My oldest loves coming in once a week and just shipping out Mountain Tough merch and apparel. She loves shipping. But her learning that business skill already at 11
And
years
how old
old.
is she?
She's 11.
Awesome.
Yes.
I'm gonna probably take my oldest and make him work in the t-shirt shop. That's a great idea.
Oh yeah. They love shipping, and they're definitely socially ahead of the game. So that social awkwardness stereotype is just a myth. I'm sure there's other factors relating to why that was going on, but what I've seen is the way they can talk to adults and engage with adults compared to a lot of their friends. They're so far ahead of the game. I mean, they'll my, my oldest, like, if we go out to dinner with guests that are from out of town, my oldest will like own the conversation at the table for like an hour, just asking all these questions. And
So
so
good.
it's been really cool. It's been awesome.
Man, that is so awesome. I'm gonna have my oldest start doing t-shirts and stuff. That's a great
Oh
idea.
yeah,
And kind of like what you're saying about like them able to own a conversation and hold it, at least, you kind of look the ability to communicate well and have a high EQ. You match that with confidence.
mm,
That is how people like that. You can be low IQ and with confidence generally still be pretty
for
successful.
sure.
I a million times. It's like you have a big old set on you, balls, you could do a lot of stuff, man. And then you add if you're intelligent, oh my gosh. And then but the biggest thing, if you have EQ and you can convey your message to people and feel what they're feeling and go, I don't care if he could do algebra at that point.
Yeah.
I have yet to use algebra in my life. And at 47, I probably won't use it to a great extent. I did figure out one time I shot a deer based on the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. I did do that, which was pretty cool. But besides that,
It's the only time it's been applicable.
yeah, that one time. But no, man, I agree. Like, yeah, there's so many history things that you can do with kids, and so many. I mean, we'll watch, little parts of the news and then tie it into history and kind of, educate the kids on what's occurring, what's not occurring, or like all that stuff. It's like,
Hmm.
gosh, like, have those conversations with them and have adult style conversations in cadence, and that's so effective. That is good for you, man. I'm glad to see this worked well for years.
Man, it was cool to see the kids at Winter Strong this year. That was awesome.
Man, they had a ball. You got to bring your kids next
Oh,
year.
after seeing it this year, I was like, God, I gotta bring my kids. It's like all dads want their kids at an event like that. Like it is the ultimate in terms of outdoor survival skills, but just being around that community. I mean, as a parent, our job should be putting our kids around these like God-fearing men and women that are larger than life characters that are all chasing their own passions and dreams in a unique way.
Sure.
And that like that has everything in one weekend. It was awesome to see him there.
Oh, thanks, man. It's interesting. I had a number of dads tell me, like, okay, who would have known that this thing is going to start turning into a kid event? And it's just like,
Yeah.
right. Like, I didn't see it either. It was always like, yeah, let's make sure the kids come, right? And then I started kind of thinking, I was like, gosh, this is kind of what my dream as a dad was to expose the kids to this kind of life,
Yeah.
like to expose them to extraordinary men and women and let them see that, because I think that was one of the things my dad, whether it had me around the gym or powerlifting meets or whatever, like I was able to see enough of it, not a ton, but enough of it to go, oh, something extraordinary is out there and I need to keep searching,
Hmm.
versus like, this is Joe six pack, just what you do. You go home and you drink your six pack and you watch whatever show, and that is life, and that, thankfully, I was taught that relatively early, that wasn't the desired outcome. So my goal is like, I love having people over. I love having new, interesting people. I mean, that's one reason why we built our house the way we did, because I want it to be a kind of a revolving door hotel of interesting people that I'd love my family to be around and be able to have conversations at dinner with them and,
Hmm.
learn all that stuff. So yeah, no, you're doing it well. We got to share notes.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Let me know if you need any
Yeah.
homeschool pointers. We are not experts at all. I mean, we're still figuring it out, but it's been really
Oh,
cool.
we are far from figuring it out, but.
They're
But even just the other day, we got a big map and I mounted it on this dry board and put some pins on it, and you don't realize, like, a 7-year-old hears Missouri. They don't know what that is. I know I didn't.
hmm.
And so now I'm starting to poke places that I hunt. And then, like, or if I'm going, hey, I'm going to Nebraska next week, and then they get to see, like, oh, that's where Nebraska is. Oh, interesting. That's near, like, I mean, it's helpful for me at times, right? But like,
Sure.
even kids, they just hear these things. They don't know where that is or what that is. And so just to have that visualization, then it's like, okay, well, you know, you could put, orange pens or your pens into one of the kids, and then they get to put places that they've been. So there's an aspirational aspect of it. They want to travel other places, or, and it's so stupidly simple, but
Hmm.
I was never put in that position early enough. I just remember California sounded like it might as well be on another planet.
The intangible things like that are priceless. I think we see the same at our house, and then you see also like our girls get to see my wife like training at home. She's doing all her workouts in the basement gym now, so like they see their mom not only working really hard as their teacher, but they see her
Yeah.
like working extremely hard physically too. And then they jump in on those sessions. So you'll see them like training together, and there's just a lot of intangibles that are priceless.
is wildly priceless. You're doing a good job. And yeah, I'm sure you've seen all the stuff they say, kids that grow up watching specifically their mom, I believe it was, make healthy choices or X number more percentage likely to do it themselves. And that's, kudos to those ladies out there making those good choices, because that is true investment, but that's true, like, leaving an inheritance to someone. I would much rather leave them good work ethic, lifestyle where they could go out and enjoy their life and make something of it than just, the alternative.
For sure. Well, cool, man. Thanks so much for
You guys are doing it. You guys have created and perpetuating the culture of what you're doing. I mean, it's been fun to watch since the early days.
Yeah, it's been a journey for sure. It's been amazing, a lot of struggles, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Of course, what we're built for.
For sure. Well, thanks, Bert. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you, and it's always great having you guys at our events, and we always appreciate the support, and looking forward to seeing you in a couple months. And I'm sure we'll be on Team, what is it,
Team Whiskey
Wolf,
Wolves.
The back channel, figuring all that out.
For sure. Yeah, we'll link up on that.
Yeah, man.
Thank you. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. What a phenomenal opportunity today to sit down and chat with Bert. Bert is an amazing human, as you can see on that episode. He cares, he has passion, he has commitment to what he is doing, and commitment to pushing the industry to innovate, bringing the outdoors and strength and conditioning together. But really, the golden nugget I want the Mountain Tough community to think about this week and take away after listening to this episode is that concept of struggling well. Bert really unpacked that in a couple different ways, that life is hard, business is hard. He talked about how hard running a business actually is. It looks pretty sexy from the outside at times, whether that's on social media or other media. It is not as sexy as it looks. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of struggles, a lot of crisis moments, a lot of ups and downs. Bert was very transparent about that today, but that golden nugget is that's okay. We're supposed to struggle. We're supposed to struggle well. Life is hard. Life is supposed to be hard, but it's how we handle those hard moments that really matters. So think about that throughout the day, throughout the week, until our next episode on the Mountain Tough podcast. Thanks so much for being here. It means the world to us to have you listening to these episodes. Please share them with a friend or family member. You can find more about Bert on Instagram, Sorinex Outdoors, or his personal account. And if you haven't checked out the Mountain Tough podcast yet on YouTube, give that a shot as well. The YouTube Mountain Tough podcast is growing quickly, so subscribe there if you haven't yet at Mountain Tough Fitness Lab. Stay dangerous, everyone, and we will see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. We'll see you next week.